Hello and welcome to episode 157 of Tall Guy Talks Travel with Rick Doherty. Of course, I am your host, Rick Doherty, with the Run Disney Princess Half Marathon weekend coming up later this month. We're going to take another look at one of our favorite aspects of Disney, and that is Run Disney. Musique from Ontario, Canada, will be joining me to talk about her upcoming races and why Run Disney has her coming back year after year to run in the Florida sun when she's accustomed to the Great White North. Before we get started, I wanted to say thank you to all of you listening. 3 years ago this week, we aired the very first episode of Tall Guy Talks Travel with Rick Doherty. We talked about Epcot's International Festival of the Arts on that show, and you can visit the YouTube channel in the modern day to see videos from the 2024 version of Festival of the Arts. There's some amazing performances from Heidi Blickenstaff and Gavin Lee in the Disney on Broadway concert series, and the German singing voice for the live-action versions of Belle and Jasmine, Julia Schieser, will also perform. I also try a lot of food items for the festival, and we enjoy the light shows on Spaceship Earth. Whenever you visit the YouTube channel, please like, comment, and subscribe. We have grown a lot in 3 years, and we have a lot planned for the next 12 months. You will want to be a part of it. Let's welcome Musique to the show. Thanks for being here, Musique.
No problem.
So we are going to be talking a little bit first about Run Disney, and then just a little bit more about visiting the parks from out of the country in general, because I think that's an experience a lot of people don't get and don't understand how hard it can be at certain points, especially in this post-pandemic, well, not post-pandemic world, but this world with the pandemic existing. But later this month, we have a lot of people who are already in their trainings getting ready for the Princess Half Marathon, and you are going to be taking part in this year's Springtime Surprise. So first I'm going to talk about that race because both of us did the very first Springtime Surprise back in 2022. I once again did the Springtime Surprise last year in 2023, at which point I vowed I would never do another Springtime Surprise. So I want to know, what about the Springtime Surprise in 2024 had you decide you want to come back and do this one again?
It's Stitch. It's exclusively because it's Stitch. I am a huge Lilo and Stitch fan. My husband when we came down for Wine and Dine in 2018, he surprised me by dressing up as Stitch. He has a reasonable length beard, and he even painted his beard blue. So if anybody's ever seen a guy in full Stitch gear with a bright blue beard, that would be me and hubby. So when they announced this one was Stitch, we were talking about coming down for Wine and Dine, and he decided, nope, we're going to do Lilo and Stitch, and we're going to do costumes for all of the events themed after Lilo and Stitch cosplaying the characters for the event. So we're going all out because it's Lilo and Stitch.
Yeah, so the races for this year's Springtime Surprise are the Neverland 5K for Peter Pan. The Adventure is Out There Up 10K. The Hakuna Matata 10 miler. And Stitch's Ohana Challenge. So if you do all three of the other races, you get a special Stitch medal. Have you done the challenges before at any of these races, or do you just pick and choose usually one or two?
We've done challenges pretty much every time. The first set of races we did was Dopey Challenge 2017. And I was not signed up for Dopey. Hubby was. He wanted the meta bling. It was our first time to Florida. We were going all out. We were even doing the cruise that you can do and get the bonus medal for doing Castaway Key. So he wanted to come home with 8 pieces of ordnance here.
Wow.
And I was signed up for 5-10 half, which was not a challenge, But what happened that year, if anyone knows, 2017 was the year that the half marathon got thunderstormed out. And it was supposed to be my first half. It was all I was training for. It was what I was telling everybody about. And I'm like, I'm not going home without a medal that I earned. So I made the kind of decision you make when it's 3 a.m. and you're pissed. And I made a dumb one. And I upgraded to the full and did the full instead. So that was the only time I wasn't doing a challenge, but I ended up having an even bigger challenge than I expected.
Wow.
I finished it 5.5 hours, but I finished it.
That is very, very impressive to not know that you were going to be doing a marathon. It's also very impressive that there was a world in which you could sign up for the marathon for Run Disney the week of the marathon, because you're never doing that anymore.
Well, what it actually was because the half marathon got rained out, the options they gave us were transfer to another Run Disney race, and we hadn't done one before, so we didn't know if we'd ever do one again, full refund, or upgrade to the marathon for no extra charge.
Oh, well, then you have to do it. Yeah.
Yeah. So I wasn't coming home with a medal I hadn't earned, so I did the full instead.
That is incredible. You certainly did earn yourself a medal. That is unbelievable. The thing about Springtime Surprise, as we get back to that one, and especially with the challenge, but I've just found this, I did the 10-miler only the last 2 years.
Okay.
And the first year, it was great. It's really, really early in the morning, but the problem was last year, it was so muggy. Like, the weather in late April in Orlando is so hit or miss. And this last one was so muggy that people were passing out on the course. I actually know, I believe he is a mutual Twitter friend of both of ours, Disney with Booze. Justin is his name. For the first time I ever met him was at the point in the 10-miler where you just go over the bridge where you're going to come into Epcot, like you're going down a hill and the monorails are heading to Epcot. And it's 7 miles into the 10-miler or something like that. It's at about the 7-mile mark, I think. And I started to get a cramp in my calf. And I was kind of walking it in a way where I was stretching out that calf, trying to get it back, from hitting that inevitable cramp that I could tell was coming. And out of the clear blue sky, I don't know who, it was the ghost of Walt Disney that sent this guy, but I hear over my shoulder, "Hey, are you Rick from Twitter?" And it's Justin, and he hands me this thing, and he's like, "Take this." And I, maybe probably shouldn't be taking random things that people are giving me on a race course. But I trusted him, and he said it would take 5 minutes for my cramp to go away. I think it went away in about 30 seconds. I don't know if it was a placebo effect that I just felt confident in it. And then all of a sudden I was able to run the last 3 miles of that race, but it was so hot and muggy. And that's what I worry about signing up for the April races. I know when this used to be Star Wars themed around this time of the year, I feel like that's one of the reasons they got rid of the rivalry run, but they still want to take advantage of having a race here. So they decided to shrink the distance a little bit, but it still can be very difficult.
That does feel like it. And if you remember the first year for it, the weekend it was actually the last weekend, March to 1st of April. And the reason I remember that really specifically was because the requirement to have a pre-departure COVID test was dropped on April 1st. And that was the Saturday of that weekend. So for us, it meant that when we flew to Florida, we would still have needed a COVID test to come back to Canada. But because we were departing on the Monday, we no longer needed a pre-departure test in Florida to board our flight. Whereas this year's, it's April 28th. So it's the end of April. But the first year they did it, it was the first weekend of April. So there's a little bit of a time difference there for getting your humidity in too as well.
Yeah, and that makes a huge difference. That time gap in Florida is a huge difference. And that first year, with it being the Tower of Terror 10 miler, the 100% reason that I signed up for it was because we were thinking there was no way we weren't going to run through Galaxy's Edge. And that was the goal, was to run through Galaxy's Edge, which we did. And then the second year, they announced it was Toy Story. So we're like, it's got to be the same course because we're going to end up running up through Toy Story Land, which was the case. And I will tell you, that first time I ever got to run through Galaxy's Edge at like 3-4 o'clock in the morning or whatever it was, the coolest thing. So good. It is obviously a brilliant land at night, but then when you think about it being in morning, and I just decided I was going to not walk it up, like I was just going to run the whole thing and just take it in like that. And it was amazing. And then that was why I ended up, even though I wasn't ready or prepared at all, the next year, I was like, I don't care. I have to sign up for it again. And it's the last one I'm going to do for a while. So I think that Princess being in late February is a good time because of the weather in Florida. I know that I've done Wine and Dine. I did the 10K one year, and it was too cold. It rained the entire time. It was a cold rain. I could never quite really get stretched out as you have to do a run like that. So I think that Princess is really my wheelhouse for when I want to do it. But I know your hubby's like, nope, we're not doing Princess, right?
Yeah. Well, the year that we came down first in 2017 for Dopey Weekend, because of the storm front that moved through, it got cold. It got very, very cold. So we'd packed for the run being, 6 or 7 Celsius, sorry, Canadian, in the morning, and then being closer to like 15. So nice and comfortable for us, not hot, but comfortable. The cold front came through, and when we went to go to our corrals, there was a wind chill. It actually hit freezing that morning. And we're sitting here going, okay, well, I had a skull cap that I'd worn to the airport. And of course, Disney gives you mostly long sleeves. So I put the long sleeve under a short sleeve. I was wearing capris anyway, because they're better for chafing and other reasons. So I felt like I was still okay for a race. If you've ever seen my Twitter, I ran in capris in -1 degree weather on the Toronto waterfront on New Year's weekend. Wow. So I'm a little easy like that. So I was okay, but you could tell all the Southerners who didn't have gear with them, who were freezing that morning. And I'm like, you are going to cramp up so bad on a morning that cool.
Yeah, when I really started running as a sport itself, not when I ran for sports when I was younger, it was really when I lived in Arizona. So I got used to running in hot, but not in muggy.
Humid.
So that has been my biggest problem with the Run Disney races, is running in the humid and really having to stop at each and every water station. If you are running a Run Disney race for the first time, I think that is the biggest thing. Stop at every water station. You will have the opportunity to grab, as you just run past, 3 or 4 cups of water. Drink the first 2, throw the second 2 on your head, and make sure you take all of the water, because especially if you're coming from somewhere up north, I mean, Canada, completely different, but you can end up really needing to be hydrated, because you will be surprised how much it will wipe you out in the Florida weather.
The one that I'll add to that is, if you're going to grab 2 cups, grab 1 of whatever electrolyte is being offered and 1 of water. Because people, especially when you're sweating out so much and you're losing so much salt, you don't realize it until you're dizzy. And at that point, you're probably past the point where adding water is going to help. So for me in Florida, I actually tend to grab a little bit more of the electrolyte drinks if I can, because I know I'm going to need that. And then, take, say, 2 electrolyte drinks and then a water, that kind of thing if I can, because the amount of sweat you lose when you're not used to it can be a very big difference.
So I know that you mentioned doing a run around New Year's on the Toronto waterfront. So you don't just do Run Disney races, you're a part of the bigger running community. And I know when I lived in Arizona, I was a big part of this, and I used to travel for races and do things like that. After moving here, I was only here for less than a year when the pandemic hit, and then my gym membership, I wasn't able to go to the gym. So I'm still getting over this pandemic here. But where are some other races that you like to go? Do you travel for some other ones, or do you kind of keep it local? And what is it about the running community in particular, but the Run Disney community specifically, that you really like? Because I do find that it is a very supportive community.
Okay, so we have done some travel for running, some within Canada. Like we've been over to Montreal, we go up to Ottawa. We've done some within Ontario. We've done a couple of races in the States. We've done the hot chocolate series in the States. So we've done Chicago and Atlanta that way. Hubby actually does obstacle course racing. So we've done travel for that. So we've done a couple of Tough Mudders, a couple of Spartans. Earlier this year, we were in Sparta, Greece for the Spartan World Championships. So we've done a fair bit of travel for that. And you're right, there's a very different community. We tend to refer to it as the tribe. As much as everybody is an individual on a race course, we're also all doing the exact same thing. So there's a tribe mentality. And I have more than once been on course where I see somebody, that stride doesn't look right, something doesn't look right. I'm going to pat someone on the shoulder and say, hey, you okay? We've all been on race courses where maybe you've seen someone down. We've all been there. We've all had minor injuries. You're right. There's very much a tribe. When it comes to Run Disney, I think there's something different about the environment, that they're not just fellow runners. They're also fellow Disney people. And there's a bit of that magical attitude behind the running. It doesn't matter if someone's going to be in Corral A and they're going to be going off very fast. They're in full costume. They know all the Disney songs that are playing. They know their characters. And they're exactly as involved in this as the people who are in the very last corral or the balloon ladies. So at other running events, because we've done the Toronto waterfront marathons, 35,000 people. We've done that. And the elites aren't mixing with anybody else. Like they might stand around for a couple of pictures, but if they're making records, but for the most part, they're not mixing. You're not seeing a mix of everybody recognizing we're all here to do the exact same damn thing. But at Disney, that doesn't matter. You're going to really see that everybody is here, not just because we're runners, but we want to run as part of our Disney experience. My half marathon that was canceled because it was dopey. What we discovered was a lot of other runners were putting in their miles for the half marathon so that when they got their dopey medal at the end, they felt they're going to feel like they deserved it. So hubby went out we were staying at the Swan and Dolphin. So he went out, put on his gear, put on his bib, went out for a run. And so was everybody else. And you went past other groups and people were dressed as dopey. Hubby's going, hi ho, and they're responding on course. And everyone's just putting in their miles. And then because families are staying in the hotels, people are coming down with their lawn chairs and chairs from their hotel rooms and just still sitting on the lawns and cheering people on.
Oh, I love that when you would run past the Boardwalk Resort and people staying at the boardwalk are sitting out on their porches and cheering for you. And it is really a great sense of community. I know that when I ran back in Arizona and I suffered an injury while gearing up for my first marathon, which I did finish, But because I pushed through on that marathon, I ended up having the injury be worse than it would have been if I would have rested. But I was so close, and I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to do it. So before my first marathon, I was always finishing in the front. Like I was, placing in my age group almost every race I did, unless it was a gigantic race. And I know that my times would be, somewhat impressive. I would tell people now what my times used to be, and they would be like, wow, that's incredible. But now when I think about some of my Run Disney races where my times have been nowhere near as fast, but I have had to work so much harder to complete that race because I am now dealing with a body that doesn't feel perfect every time. Some of those impressive numbers that I put up before. So I did okay for the Princess Half Marathon in 2020, just a couple weeks before they shut down everything. But then coming after the pandemic, when I signed up for my first post the pandemic had started race, and I was a little worried, like, am I going to be embarrassed that my time is going to look like this? And I was worried about it. But then as I was finishing that race and I was struggling and I was realizing, I've worked harder to finish this than I did for any of those races that I did before. When I did the, half marathon in Santa Fe, New Mexico in the high elevation, and I thought that was going to be awful. And that was a breeze compared to this 10K that I just did through Epcot. And it makes you realize that when everybody's cheering for those people towards the end, or the people who aren't putting up a big, impressive time, it's not like they're looking down on these people. Each and every person is running their own race and has their own goal. And if you finish, heck, even if you don't finish and they give you that medal and they sweep you with the balloon ladies, if you go and finish it later, I'm still cheering it for you for it. Like, it is such a great atmosphere to be around people who finish the 5K in 15 minutes and then come back and cheer for the people where it takes them an hour to finish the 5K. And that is what I like about the running community in general. But I feel like it's even more impressive in the Run Disney community because you have a lot of people who are at various levels of times and goals.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I love the fact that the Run Disney races sends off confetti for the last person to finish. They make the point that the last person across the line is to be celebrated just as much as the first. And that says it all, doesn't it? When they talk about every mile is magic, and the idea that basically at every mile on every course, you're going to have a character interaction, you're going to have a water station, you're going to have whatever. That's only part of it. And the volunteers and the organization and the people who are there with their family and friends to cheer it. I told my husband, I will never do a marathon again unless it's Disney, because the little things of that Disney race where it's like, I've only trained for a half, I'm going to do twice that distance, but the little things of the characters and the volunteers and the bits and pieces you're going through, that's what kept me mentally in the place that my body could keep up to. And it makes all the difference. This 2023, I did full dopey. And I said, I originally signed up for it because spots were disappearing. I'm like, okay, I will sign up both of us for dopey. And if I choose not to do the full marathon, it's fine. I'll do the 5-10 half, and I'll skip the marathon if I'm not feeling up to it. Because I was not training well, or at all, really. And then on the last day, I'm like, nope, I'm putting my head to it and I'm doing it. And I finished, it was not a good time. I finished 20 minutes ahead of the balloon ladies, but I done full dopey. It didn't matter how far ahead of them I was. It didn't matter how many people finished ahead of me. I finished full dopey, and people were applauding for me just as much when I crossed that line as if I'd been an hour ahead of when I did. And it didn't matter. I got all the characters, photos I wanted. I saw all the sites I wanted, and I crossed the finish line with a frozen elephant in my hand. I was happy about that. I had to. I had to. That was just funny.
So I want to ask you a little bit about the time where you were setting out to do a half marathon and then you signed up for that marathon on a whim. Did you go out and kind of run the half marathon that you were expecting and then just try to survive the extra 13.1? Or did you pace yourself a little better? Like, I personally, and this is probably why I suffered an injury, just would have bolted that half marathon, got that done, and tried to get as far ahead of the balloon ladies as possible, and then see if I could just walk the rest of it.
I was actually kind of surprised in myself because at the time, the longest distance I had done was a 10-miler. Because they say, you know, if you're training for a distance, train for about 75% of the distance and you can do it. And that's kind of an even number for it. So the longest I had done was a 10-miler. So, and when I had done that 10-miler, I had run probably 8 of it, walked a kilometer or so, and then finished it. So I hadn't run the whole distance. I usually do run walk. But on that morning, I ran to 11 miles. And I surprised myself. And the thing is, I was still pacing myself because it was cold, which kind of worked for me because I'm used to running in the cold. Because you imagine, I'm training up here in December to prepare for dopey. So it was cold anyway. And then I got to 11 miles. I'm like, I was so proud of myself just for getting to that without having taken a walk break. I'm like, okay, I'm totally warmed up. So I'm walking along the course. And at that point, we were by the water treatment plant. And it's like, okay, I don't need my long sleeve anymore. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to walk to the next kilometer marker. And it's like, okay, it's like I'm walking down the course with both shirts off, trying to take my long sleeve off and keep my short sleeve off and tie my long sleeve around my waist while I've got my purse that I keep my after race things in on. And I'm like, I'm sure people thought I was nuts. But at that point, I'm like, I can take all the time I want in this little break because I'm so much further ahead than I wanted. Either way, I'd never been set on getting a certain time. All that had ever mattered to me was that I was going to finish. So at that point, it was just run 2 kilometers, walk a kilometer, run 2 kilometers, walk a kilometer for the rest of the course. And that worked for me.
That's awesome. Before I let you go, I want to talk a little bit about Disney in general, because I think sometimes we get a little spoiled. I talk about, I go all the time and I don't get to be in that position where I miss things. So if you're going once a year, what are some of the things when you're looking not only to visit maybe once a year, but when you also have to set aside all of this time for running? So you're going to be tired. You have minimal time in the parks. What are some of the things that every time you go, you're like, I have to hit this thing, I have to accomplish this? Or do you just sort of take it a little more easy and hit whatever you can, whatever has manageable lines, and you're like, I'll get the next thing the next time?
We tend to overplan. So we tend to be very much in advance looking for kind of hit certain very specific milestones. We're also ones where when we go down, we always stop for groceries. So we always make the point of we don't have to hit certain food stops and things like that. And then we've always got fuel in our room. So, if we're not going to plan for a sit down dinner after about 3:00 because you don't want your stomach to be upset or anything like that. And we always, it's like, okay, back to the room. You have quick food. You got bagels with peanut butter that you can grab for first thing in the morning, that sort of thing. So what we've been doing for the last couple of trips is we know what parks we're going to go to. If we plan for a sit down meal, we try to make it before like 12:30. So we always have time to digest. If something doesn't agree with us, time to deal with any problems. And then when it comes to the parks themselves, we haven't been back to Animal Kingdom in a while. It's one of those things where it would probably be useful to go after, say, a half marathon where you may not have as much time in the park, but we just haven't been back in a while. We always like to hit, if we're going to Hollywood Studios, we have to hit Tower of Terror. It's one of the few rides that we will actually wait in standby for. Otherwise, we're going to take Genie Plus or whatever we're calling it now and try to get in fast. Because that one, you've got to hit that one if you're at Hollywood. Epcot, I always love hitting. I always have to go on the Figment ride. I love that one. So it's not as much about doing anything specific. Magic Kingdom is usually the park we like to go to after we have finished the challenge, because we like to walk around with our medals. and it's funny because you're walking down Main Street and you're hearing other people with their challenge medals clinking, and it's like moo, moo, because we all sound like cows with a cowbell. The one time it was really funny. We were wearing our 2 challenge medals, but we each had the other medals in our bag because I think it was after Wine and Dine, and we were going to go to the after party in Epcot, and we were in Hollywood Studios, and we'd gone to the photo pass customer service because we were missing a photo or something, and they asked us, well, why aren't you wearing all of your medals? And at the same time we both said they're too heavy. So I pulled out my medals, and I carry them in a Crown Royal bag, very Canadian of me, and I put the other 2 medals on top, and I said, here. And I just held my hand out and I said, put your hands out. And I just dropped it into their hands. And you watch everybody's hands drop at how heavy the full stack of medals was. And next thing I know, the photographers are passing around the medals to kind of admire the different details. And that's the stuff that I really enjoy. So I really like doing that at Magic Kingdom afterwards, because you really get that experience with the cast members there. They really kind of recognize when you have the Run Disney medals on.
Yeah, those photo pass photographers at Magic Kingdom, especially, they tell them if somebody's showing up with medals from those races, take the time with them, because I know there have been times where I've just had it on me. Like, I've gone a little later in the week, and maybe there are fewer Run Disney people who are in the parks by that point, and they went through all this training into how to treat the Run Disney people. So they're like, no, I want to get one more use out of that. So yeah, they will definitely take your picture for a long time. They will do a photo shoot with you. You'll feel like Taylor Swift or something. It's really, really a fun experience. And I think that's a great place to end it here, because I think one of the things that Disney does with the Run Disney races is makes everybody feel special. Yes, you pay a premium for these races. As a matter of fact, you pay more than a premium for these races, but they do try to make you feel like you're part of a community, and that's priceless.
Absolutely.
So, Musique, thank you so much for being on the show. I really had a great time having you on here.
Thanks for having me.
This has been episode 157 of Tall Guy Talks Travel with Rick Doherty. Next week, Sarah Says will be back on the show to talk about the differences in the way Universal and Disney handle intellectual properties focused on children, and we wonder if Disney is losing the kids. That will be next Thursday. Until then, have a great week.